I'm Clive from PC Builder, and in today's video I'm going to show you how you can build a budget gaming PC for under £400. I'm filming this in late February 2021, and as you are probably aware, trying to get hold of a graphics card at the moment can be quite difficult. On the table we have the following parts. For the CPU we have a Intel Core i5-3570K that I purchased from CEX for $41.95 including postage, boasting a whopping 4 cores and 4 threads with a core frequency of 3.4 GHz and boost speeds up to 3.8. For the motherboard we have an Intel DH61WW motherboard that I purchased from eBay for $22.99 including postage, and as a bonus it came with an Intel stock CPU cooler. So I expect to add £5 to £10 if you don't get one. For memory I have two 8GB DDR3 1600MHz RAM that I've used for my own stock, as I am still waiting for my delivery from CEX. The RAM coming from CEX costs $43.90 for 16GB. Yes, I know they're not a matching pair, but let's see how this goes. For the graphics card we have blown just under half our budget on the GTX 1060 3GB, and yes, you probably guessed it, it is also from CEX. This cost £170 and would have been quite a lot cheaper had I bought this last year. I have to say that I'm impressed that it came complete in box, and the serial number on the box matches the card. It is also in very good condition and has had the thermal paste renewed. So that's everything that I purchased used. Now for the new parts, we have a 120GB SSD for the boot drive to run Windows off of, and a 1TB hard drive for storing a few games. Both of these new would have been £50.37. The case, which isn't shown here and will be in the second part of the video, is a Rio Toro CR400 gaming case, which is currently on special offer at $28.82 from CCL. I've based all my new prices on CCL prices. The power supply that I'm going to be using, if we can get it to focus, you can tell I'm not a professional cameraman, is a cheap 80+ bronze rated PSU that I'm using long term to see if it's as bad as what people think it is. I haven't had any issues at all with it so far, and should be perfectly fine to run the 1060, as on the box the 1060 says it requires a 400 watt power supply. A similar model would be around $32.99. Power supplies are a very long video in itself and causes much discussion on any PC internet forum. But as long as you are sensible and don't go for an unbranded, unrated power supply, you should be good. So the total for this build would be £391.02. That includes postage as well. Let's build it and see what kind of performance we can get in games. And the most important question will be, will it play Cyberpunk 2077? Right, first thing we're going to be doing is putting in the CPU. What you do is pull that out, lift that up, grab your CPU, make sure the little notches there and there line up in there. There's a little gold triangle in the bottom left hand corner. Just give it a little wiggle, make sure it's in there properly. Then put that under there. Push this down, it requires a bit of force, and then slide that under there. For the RAM, make sure these levers are pulled out. Some motherboards only have a lever one side. Make sure the notch on there lines up with the notch inside the board. Push down both sides and you get a nice satisfying click most of the time. Notch lines up. Click. Next we'll put the CPU cooler on. So it's a stock one, and this one isn't going to be running too hot. I won't bother applying thermal paste. As you can see, it comes with enough thermal paste on it for certainly for this use anyway. If it was a higher end CPU, I probably would wipe that off and put some decent thermal paste on it. Now this should line up with the slots. Click, 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 click. Right, next stage is to plug in the fan. Let's put the wires down there. That's got a notch in it that lines up with the notch on there. Pushes down, there we go. Next step will be to plug up the power supply, plug it into a monitor and check it boots into BIOS first of all, make sure it's all working as it should. In the interest of keeping the video as short as possible, I didn't record me installing Windows and jumping straight to the benchmarks. We started off with Rocket League, which is one of the easier games to play. It returned a minimum frame rate of 211, maximum of 251 with an average of 237. So a good start for this budget PC. Let's move on to the next game after this short clip of me being absolutely terrible at the game. It doesn't get any better on any of the games, but we'll move on to the next game and see how that goes. For the next game we move on to Fortnite, and you get to see probably one of the shortest games of Fortnite ever, continuing the trend of my terrible games playing. It returned a minimum of 49 frames a second, a maximum of 160 frames a second, and an average of just over 104 frames a second. So again, not too shabby for this nice budget PC. For the next game we've moved on to one of my favourite games of all time, Jurassic World Evolution, which is essentially SimCity but with dinosaurs. You build up your dinosaur park and release dinosaurs into it. This game, a little bit more demanding than the other two, but still returned a minimum of 42 frames a second, a maximum of 79 frames a second, and an average frame rate of just under 60 frames a second, which on high settings is pretty good in all fairness. Once again, really impressed with this cheap computer setup. Very good value for the money. Okay, and now on to the big one, Cyberpunk 2077. How will it do? Well, as you can see, it's actually playing it quite well. Yes, it's on the lowest settings that I could set it up to, but nonetheless it's still hovering around the 60 frames a second on 1080p low, and in my opinion it still looks pretty good. Looks better in real life than on this video. So yeah, in conclusion, I think this sub £400 PC build has done extremely well. You can see the GPU temperatures and CPU temperatures as well, both doing really well. Yes, it's in an open bench, but when it's inside the Rio Toro CR400 it will still do no problems at all, because it's got good airflow and a couple of fans, as you'll find out in the next video. And in the next video we're going to be trying the same games with the same GTX 1063GB, but with an i3 10th generation 10100F on a H410 motherboard and 16GB of DDR4 RAM, and we'll see how that goes. See you next time.